If you would like to create a business around your art or your poetry, then that means that you have to become the kind of person that people are drawn to and come to. This next book in the Creative Companionship is Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley, and it talks all about this concept of becoming that person, what it takes, what are the actions that you need to do, and what are the results that it's going to give you in your creative business. Guys, welcome back to the Creative Companionship. This is a book club where we take a look at business texts and try to apply them to poetry and to guide you in this process. As always, there is me. What's up, guys? My name is Jeff with an O. I am a full poet, and this is the book that kind of launched Daniel Priestley's career. For those of you who aren't aware, Daniel Priestley is a guy who's found a lot of companies. He never graduated from college. He started off just being as like a pizza delivery guy, and then he became, through the help of a mentor, really good at just kind of understanding what it takes to start different businesses, doing this in Australia and then doing it in London. And so he wrote a book that helped launch his career independently as well. And we're going to be going over the first 40 pages or so today, and then over the next 2 or 3 videos, we'll be wrapping up the book. What are 10 takeaways, though, that you need from these first 40 pages of the book? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to acknowledge that the world we are in right now is very different than even the world that was 5, 10, 15 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. And when we look at like the poetry space or the art space, one of the things we know is that these systems oftentimes have been going on for 50 years, 100 years, if not more. So there's lots of ripe opportunity for change if you know what to look for. On the other hand, if you stick with those traditional systems, you're going to find that things are happening now, technology related, platform related, being able to create new things on your own and put them into the world without the use of gatekeepers or people telling you what to do. You know, if you're stuck in traditional means, you're going to fall behind. You're going to get lost, and you're going to also, in the arts world, be competing with everyone else, which is most other artists, in all honesty, who are doing the same thing as you. The truth is, though, that there really is no need for competition. Some of the biggest changes that we've seen is that in terms of expectations of what people buy versus what people get, there is an assumption now that people no longer need to pay for things that in the past they would have paid for. We see this in the entertainment industry. We see this in terms of internet access and resources online. Naturally, we also see this in art. I think the music industry is a great example of that. You can listen to all the songs that in the past you would have had to pay a lot of money for if you wanted to listen to them when you wanted to listen to them. This also means that if we're creating an arts business, we also have to understand that, you know, business means we're going to have to create products or offers to put into the world, but they can't be the things that people would expect not to pay for. Or we're going to have to reinvent it or change it to make it something that people understand that they will have to pay for. Throughout this book, Daniel he wants to make this practical, so he does provide some questions at the ends of different sections. And here are examples of some of the questions from this beginning part of the book that maybe will be helpful for you as you decide what you want to do with your arts business. Daniel asks specifically, what are things that you find easy? What would you actually want to get paid for if you had a choice? And also, what would be fun for you to do as a project? We mentioned a concept like this before in our Poet Business Institute video on Ikigai and the 4 concepts that you need in order to start thinking about creating your poetry business around. If you're missing any of these categories, what can end up happening is you can end up leading a life that feels very unfulfilling or that's missing on a key component for your happiness. The 4th key takeaway from Key Person of Influence from Daniel Priestley is that you want to be understanding the difference between people who are functional and people who are vital. We've mostly been raised to be very functional. School teaches us to adhere to rules, meet expectations, and, in honesty, be replaceable. People who are functional are people who are good or skilled at what they do. They're talented at it. They're able to perform as they're directed. However, they also view other people as competition because other people are also doing the same thing as them. People who are functional are also people that are not really in control of their situation. They're dependent on systems or their bosses or other people to maintain their current living. Lastly, people who are functional in general are adverse. They're trying to avoid discomfort or what they perceive to be risk. Instead, they're seeking comfort. They're seeking safety. Even though increasingly what we're seeing is what was safe years ago no really longer exists, right? Like tenure jobs going away, salary jobs going away. In their place, we're seeing a lot more contract work. We're seeing a lot more short term, less full schedule, more part-time and stacks on that. So it's a very different situation, yet we still are trying to hold on to what worked in the past. So then who are vital people? Well, vital people are people that can't be replaced because of the uniqueness that they bring. These are people who are extremely focused on the value of what it is to create, not purely just the function of getting the job done. They're really focused on trying to understand, how can I make this even more valuable for the person that receives it? How can I make it a better experience for them? Vital people are also more adaptable, more willing to embrace the actual situation that they're in and take advantage of it. We see, for instance, in the poetry space, if you're willing to break away from traditional methods like submitting, like doing the academia route, the going to conference route, if you're able to try to forge your own path in the poetry scene. Not to say that it's going to be easy, but the long-term benefits may take you farther than if you'd followed the traditional path. Because of this ability to advance based on your own uniqueness, this means that other people aren't really competition. The same people that would scare people who are functional are viewed as partners for people who are vital. I mean, that's one of the things that I think having my own poetry platform has really helped me, is that anytime I'm in conversation with other poets, it doesn't matter how big they are, how small they are, we're not really competing. So it's not really like putting bigger name posts on like pedestals or stuff like that. It's like, okay, you went on that route and it worked for you, but I'm not on that route. So we're on completely different paths. Like, where it's not like it's a hierarchy. Everything's very lateral. So it's not really based on competition, because you're doing one thing, I'm doing something else. It's like if you have like you meet someone who's like a CEO at a company that you've never heard of. That's different than if you worked at that company and you met the CEO. It's you view that person differently. On the one hand, you might have kind of like, I don't want to say like this awe, but there's kind of like this certain level of respect, because like, oh wow, you're at the company and you're like up here. Whereas if you don't know the person, you never heard of the company, you're just like, oh, that's cool, you have that company, that's great. But it's not really a feeling of like superiority, or the respect is different, right? It feels much more mutual versus, I don't want to say parasocial, but hierarchical. The fifth takeaway is one that we've already mentioned. There really is no more safety. If you're looking for the safe route, it doesn't really exist anymore. You're not going to find it. The reasons for this are technology is now changing too fast. We're seeing that there's huge shifts in the economy that are happening at much more rapid frequencies than in the past. And we're also seeing, again, the rise of contracts and shorter term work versus things that you would get a job and be expected to stick with it for years, if not decades. Because of these shifts, our sixth takeaway is that there's an increased value on developing connections with other people. And when connections become more important, that means that being known becomes more important. So people have to be able to know who we are and have immediate associations with our name and our face, and also what it is that we do, which means that we need to lean into what it is that makes us unique even more. It's not enough, again, if you're doing a poetry business, just to be doing poetry. You got to think, what is the specific angle that you're bringing? Additionally, this means that we're going to have unique opinions. For instance, the verses going on live on poetry. I can speak to in Columbus, there is no other organization that's really teaching poets how to live on poetry. There's no other organization that has a literal poetry space. In my communication business, there are tons and tons and tons of English teachers. There's a smaller but still large number of pronunciation coaches, but the number of people who is actively using poetry to teach communication devices, that's very small, and that's where I fit in. Connected to this is number 7, is that the more you're able to lean into your uniqueness, your story, your approach, your positions that are unlike what other people are doing, the more you're going to get opportunities. We've talked in the past about Zipf's law, the power law. The person who's in the number 1 spot gets 3 times the opportunities as the person who's in the number 2 spot. The person who's in the number 2 spot gets 3 times the opportunities of number 3, which means that if you're number 100, well, you're just fighting for crumbs. And if you're less than that, there's literally nothing left. So you need to be in a position where you can be the number 1 poet in a thing, or the number 1 artist in the thing, or the number 1 business in a thing. I'm not necessarily in the position to be the number 1 poet in the city of Columbus, but I can be in the position to be the number 1 poet who talks about business in Columbus. As we're creating businesses around our poetry and our art, there is an irony that we need to consider for our 8th takeaway, which is work and working hard. We don't necessarily want to be the hardest worker. The people who work the hardest are people that generally earn the less. The people who work the hardest are generally the people who earn the least. You can think, for instance, at a hotel, the person who works the hardest is probably the housekeeper, especially compared to, say, the receptionist, and especially compared to the owner of the hotel. Think, for instance, a meeting with a new client that's an hour long might long-term give you way more benefit than an entire day working at your shift. One approach that can help with this view on work is understanding that for our 9th point, that what we do, our work is not work, it is a game. This is something that Seth Godin speaks about as well, so I encourage you to look up interviews about games by Seth. But if we can view what we do as just challenging aspects of a game or nuances that we have to learn the rules for and adapt our gameplay towards, and actually find ways to enjoy the process, it makes the work much, much easier. That's something I tell my communication students all the time, is that, hey, like, your accent, we're 10,000 mistakes away from speaking the way you want. We have to find love in the process and not care so much about actually arriving at the top of the mountain. To end this session of the Creative Companionship, our 10th takeaway from the opening 40 pages of Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley is that a business does not need a series of things. Not anymore. Maybe in the past they did, but today they do not. And this is empowering. A business does not need really any upfront cost to start. You can start a business for free. A business does not need to please everyone. In fact, it really just wants to please a small number of the right people. A business does not need to be focused on face-to-face experiences to be powerful and to grow. People don't even need to know what you look like in order to really start a business. You don't even need to know what your customers look like necessarily. A business does not need to do what worked yesterday. In fact, I tell my students all the time that the most dangerous answer very often is a right answer, because when you find a right answer, you stick with that. You don't change. When in reality, it's very rare where there's only a single right answer. Usually there's this right answer, and then there's a whole other right answer too that could also work. So we need to find what is that right answer for our situation. So we need to be willing to accept that, yes, what worked in this situation worked, but there were also other ways that could have worked as well. And maybe those other ways would have been more efficient or better for us. A business does not need to have massive teams. It's funny, on Saturday, I'm organizing a book fair in Columbus. This is the first poetry book fair I've run. It's just me running it. I organized it. I'm using my poetry space here And then I'm also renting another space just for today. That's nearby, a couple doors down. But this all started because another organization originally had a book fair or a book festival organized for the same date, but they canceled. And the reason they canceled was because they had staffing issues, they said. And so this is just as a proof to me, but also hopefully proof to the city that, hey, you don't need a lot of people to organize something. It can honestly even just be a single person to get it done. You don't need a large team. Large teams can certainly make things easier. If I did it again, I'd probably want to have a team to help out with some stuff, but it can also be done alone. And lastly, a business does not need to have 1 million customers. You just need to have enough of the right people. Seth Godin refers to, I believe it was like the minimum viable number or something like that, where it's like it's the least number of people that you need to survive. 100 people giving you $10 is $1,000, right? 1,000 people giving you $10 is, we're not. So it's like, this is what we want to be considered. You don't necessarily need a lot of people to survive on what you want. Out of those 10 takeaways, which one do you think was the most valuable for you? And if you want some more examples of previous books that we've looked at in the Creative Companionship, you can check out Chris Stowe's Unbland Yourself, as well as Marty Neumeier's Zag over here.